This took place during the summer of 2002. I was going into grade 8, so about 12 or 13. The area that I was living in was a pretty safe suburban area in a pretty small city. We spent a lot of time outside as kids. Our parents were all acquainted with one another, so sleepovers and things were pretty much the norm. My friend, Tammy, had her parents going out of town for the weekend and left her high school-aged brother to watch. My friend, Tammy, had her parents going out of town for the weekend, and they left her high school-aged brother to watch over her. They said that she could have some friends over, and she invited about 5 girls, myself included. Around 2 a.m., we hadn't seen her brother in a while, and thought that it might be fun to take a walk. Again, generally a safe neighborhood, so off we went. We were at a long road about 30 minutes from her house, just laughing and enjoying the freedom, when I see this Burgundy car drive by us very slowly. This wasn't my first experience with strange people doing strange things in cars, so my alarm bells were going off immediately. I stared into the car. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel someone staring. For some reason I was very deeply put off by it. It felt like a long time, but in reality it was probably only a few seconds. I asked my friends if they had noticed the car, and they didn't, so I brushed it off and we tried to continue on our way. At some point, like something out of a horror movie, it starts pouring rain. We decide to head back, and on the way we passed the elementary school. There were a group of guys under the doorway yelling to us to come over. That kind of spooked my friends, and they wanted to just get home. So there were 2 ways to get to Tammy's house. The way we came, which was about 10 minutes longer, and the second way, which was through a very dark ravine surrounded by tall trees and a large set of steps up a hill. Tammy and our other friend Morgan were dead set on going through the ravine. The rest of us decided that it was too dangerous, and we tried to argue with them. They didn't listen to us and went anyway, which left 4 of us to go the longer way. We kept walking and turned onto a street, and what do I see? The same car that passed us earlier. Then out of nowhere, a man appears from behind a fence. At this point, I get the sense that he's been following us all night. How else would he have known to wait on this particular street? He looks to be middle-aged and slightly overweight, and my eyes lock onto his. This guy wanted something. I'll never forget that moment. I'm walking, he's walking, and the next thing I know, he's running towards us. I scream to my friend to run, and we just take off running as fast as we can. Halfway down the street, I think he realized that he couldn't catch us on foot, and takes off back to his car. At this point, we duck to the side of a house, and I'm already starting to climb the fence, trying to get the hell out of there. My friends pull me down, and we slowly creep out to see where he went. The man is out of his car again, and is pacing back and forth on the street, frantically looking for us, like some human version of cat and mouse. We take off back in the direction that we came. His car was loud as he drove it back down to the end of the street, close to our second hiding spot. I clearly remember hearing it, but we were hidden beside a house with a large tree out front, furiously debating whether or not we should go knock on someone's door. We had 3 options at this point. Run past him and hope he didn't catch one of us. Run even farther away to one of our houses. Mine was probably the closest, at about 10 minutes away through an open field. Or lastly, run through the ravine to get back to Tammy's house. In hindsight, we probably should have just knocked, but we were kids and afraid of getting into trouble. Not only that, but what if nobody came to the door and he cornered us? Nobody owned a cell phone, so we decided to make a run for it again through the ravine. He's chasing us, and at this point I'm too afraid to look back. I spoke to one of the girls about this a few years ago, and she said that she looked back while we were entering the ravine and saw him running down the stairs after us. That was the only part that still had lighting, and then darkness. We all managed to get back to Tammy's house. I shit you not, they were sitting in the room laughing at us as we banged on the door to be let in. They didn't believe us initially. I have no doubt in my mind that he intended on harming whoever he caught that night. The way he looked at me is not something I'll ever forget, and I'm glad that none of us had to find out what was in that car. I'm not sure if he was following me around afterward, but I did see him again quite a few times. Only when I was walking alone, and only during the early mornings as I stopped going for walks at night. He would drive by me slowly, in the way that he did that night, and I would take off running. Eventually, he just disappeared. I grew up in a very safe, very affluent neighborhood. It was unheard of for anyone to lock their cars or houses, and when someone new moved to the neighborhood, it was mere moments before they were welcomed with open arms and open doors. Despite being surrounded by what could be described as one large neighborhood family, my mom was very particular about the rules of the house being followed, one of which was never going out alone. Walking to a friend's house? 3 of us would have to go, so 2 could walk home together after dropping you off. It was rare, but occasionally just 2 of us would be able to sneak out from under her watchful eye and run to the corner store a few blocks down for some candy or soda. One sweltering day during the summer I turned 9, I found myself home alone and restless. I decided to take my sister's cool new 10-speed for a spin around the block a few times. Now, even though I was tall for my age, the bike was still a few inches too big for me. I decided that didn't matter. I jumped on and started pedaling. My first lap around the neighborhood went off without a hitch. Birds were chirping, the sun was shining, and the wind was blowing through my curled hair. It felt wonderful. Second lap around the block, I passed an older, unfamiliar car parked on the side of the road, and the sun reflecting off the huge scrape down the side temporarily shocked my vision into bright blue stripes which I furiously tried to blink away. In the third lap, I saw the car pull off to the side of the road, heading towards me, and a tiny pit of unease began to grow in my stomach as the driver slowed when he passed me. I chalked it up to being scared of getting caught out alone, and continued on my way. I picked up speed as I rounded the corner towards my house, and decided to go for one more time around the block, but to make it quick so I'd beat my mom home and avoid the trouble I knew I'd be in if she caught me out alone. I hit the bottom of the hill next to our house with some speed, and started to climb to the top, slowing more and more the closer I got. By the time I reached the top of the hill, I had to stop to catch my breath, teetering the too-tall bike at my hip. As I struggled to catch my breath, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My arms locked on the handlebars, and every inch of my body froze. I had been caught. I just knew it. I heard a car creeping up behind me, and it just had to be my mom. Only it wasn't. When relief should have washed over me, the unknown dread only deepened, further stiffening my frozen limbs. I turned to see the same old car, with the same blinding scratch down the side, slowing down right next to me. The man stopped the car right next to my bike on the wrong side of the street, and through his opening driver door started to ask me if I had seen a stray dog running about, because his had come off the leash and had run off. I froze. This cliché question is the one they warned us about in school, the one every kidnapper supposedly uses. I decided if I answered him firmly and rode my bike away, that he would know his plan wouldn't work on me. Plus, he might just really be looking for his dog. And this was my plan. My terrified body betrayed that plan, and a trembling "no" is all I could manage. As I fumbled my feet to the pedals of this too big bike, his car door flew open, and he lunged. "No!" I said again, as I wobbled my way past his open car door, his hand brushing the back of my shirt and knocking my back tire as I pedaled as fast as I could, the 50 feet to the next driveway I saw. I pedaled, legs burning up to the drive, running my front tire so hard into my neighbor's front step that it bent the wheel. My body catapulted over the handlebars, and I burst through my neighbor's front door. Eddie! Eddie, help! My neighbor wasn't home. I ran into the kitchen, calling in hopes that I was wrong. Eddie! What are you doing? A man's voice came from behind me, and I froze, hearing my heartbeat in my ears, feeling the blood pumping through my veins, and knowing that this was it. I slowly turned around, not knowing what else to do, and there stood my neighbor's son, just home from college. I dissolved into tears, gulping about what happened. He tossed the bent bike into the back of his truck and drove me around the corner to the safety of my home. My mom was home and had the look of death in her eyes until she saw my tear-streaked face. The police were called. The neighbors were called. The car had been spotted frantically circling the block a few minutes following our encounter, but he was gone by the time the police arrived. To this day, 20 years later, I still have a hard time riding my bike alone. I still get chills when cars slow down next to me, and I wonder if the next girl was as lucky as I.
Scariest Night of My Life, written by Silent Schizoid. This takes place late last spring, almost exactly 1 year ago. At the time, my parents and I lived a somewhat solitary life out in the countryside. Other than bad cell phone and internet reception, there were other homes in the area, but not many, and exclusively consisted of retirees and wealthy families. My parents, who are wealthy and retired, were planning a trip to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, to sightsee and visit my mom's ill mother. I've been to Gettysburg before on a class trip and decided not to go. I had schoolwork and projects to work on that were due that Friday, and going to Gettysburg for a second time didn't seem all that interesting to me. My parents do a lot of traveling and volunteer work, and over the years placed a lot of trust in me, so they had no issues with me being alone for several days, or even a week at a time by the time I reached 16 years old and obtained my driver's license. So, anyway, I got up the morning of their departure, and by the time I left for school, my parents were preparing to leave. When I got home that afternoon, they were already gone. I had 3 days alone. I spent the first afternoon and evening doing homework and gaming. That evening, I decided to drive out to the closest town and pick up a pizza for myself, since I didn't feel like preparing anything. When I got home, I ate about half the pizza, and after watching some YouTube, decided to turn in for the night. I awoke sometime around midnight, which isn't out of the ordinary for me, as I sometimes have trouble sleeping at night. I went downstairs for a glass of orange juice and decided to flip through the channels on our living room television. I was sitting there, looking at my phone more than watching the television, when I saw a light turn on through one of the living room windows. It was our garage's motion sensor light. Did my parents come home much earlier than expected? I sat quietly and waited. The light eventually turned off, and I didn't hear any noises. It must have been an animal or something, perhaps a deer. I turned off the television and went upstairs into my bedroom and lied in bed. I fell asleep not too long afterwards. I awoke to the sound of my alarm. Time to get ready for school. Oh, joy. I arose, got ready, and headed out the door, into my car, and drove off to school. I got home that afternoon and spent the day, similarly to before. Did homework, gamed, ate dinner, went to bed. I slept through the night that night and awoke the next day and headed off to school. My mom called me during school and left a message saying that they were going to stay longer than expected, as my grandmother was in some pretty rough shape. I got home, and once again the day went as it did the last two, except this time I finished up my senior project and was almost officially finished with high school. About time, I say. I relaxed that evening, outside on our hammock, and read a book until sunset, debating whether or not to travel to Gettysburg the next day to visit my grandmother. Dinner time came and went, and I decided to settle on the couch and continue reading my book. Since it was Friday, I had no school the next day and stayed up longer than usual. It was about 11 o'clock at night when I looked at my phone and noted the time. I decided to go upstairs and game for a couple of hours. I left my bedroom and across our foyer to use the bathroom sometime that night, when I noticed through one of our front door windows that the garage light was on again. That's odd. I peered outside toward the light and saw my car, but nothing else. The light turned off, and I went to use the bathroom. I decided to grab a snack afterwards, so I went into my kitchen after using the bathroom and made a sandwich. Out of nowhere, I heard a faint tapping noise coming from one of our morning room windows. I felt on edge as I looked toward the tapping and saw nothing but blinds over the windows. Having never dealt with something like this before, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't have been hearing things, could I? I definitely didn't imagine the motion sensor light being on. I wanted to call my mom, but they're most likely sleeping by now. I waited and listened in to see if I could hear anything else. Nothing. I went upstairs into my parents' bedroom and found my dad's handgun in his dresser drawer. I sat in my bedroom and looked out my window toward the backyard. I watched for what felt like 10 minutes or so, hoping that whoever or whatever it was would go away. I eventually went back downstairs, and to my horror heard the tapping noise again, except now it was coming from one of the front door windows. The garage sensor light was on, but when I looked toward the window, I saw nobody. Perhaps a friend of mine was playing a prank on me. I have a couple of good friends who know that I'm home alone, but they've never done anything like this before. I texted all of them and only got one reply. He denied being at my house and told me he was lying in bed trying to sleep. I waited and waited until I could hear another noise, but about a half hour went by without further incident. I didn't see the garage light come on again, nor did I hear any other noises for the rest of the night. I turned in for the night after checking the locks on our doors and windows. I awoke the next morning and went downstairs to have breakfast. Afterwards, I vividly remembered the previous night's events and went outside to look around the house to see if anything was out of place or peculiar. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. Our patio was left untouched. None of our stuff had been moved or taken, and our shed hadn't been tampered with. Even our shed, which was unlocked, didn't seem to be messed with. I looked inside of it and didn't notice anything missing that I had seen the week prior while assisting my dad with yard work. I went back inside and decided to sleep for a while longer. I woke that afternoon around 2:30. I called my mom and told her about what happened last night, and she told me to keep my dad's gun with me if necessary and call the police if I saw anyone or heard the tapping again. She also told me that they would be home the next evening. I went on a drive later on that afternoon and stopped by my friend's house for a while before heading home. I came home later than expected and went inside, plopping myself down on the couch and watched YouTube on my phone until nightfall. After eating dinner, I sat back on the couch and watched more YouTube. I was dozing off on the couch when I heard the sound of someone walking on our patio. Uh-oh. I swiftly made my way toward the back door and waited, listening for any more noises. I then had an idea. I quickly ran toward the front door and peered towards the garage to see if this person would walk towards it and turn the motion sensor light on. Then I can see if I know the person, if I could see their face. Luckily, exactly that happened. I was looking toward the garage when the light came on. I saw the person light up in the night. It wasn't anybody that I recognized. At first, I couldn't tell if it was a male or a female, given the long hair that covered half of their face, and their attire wasn't noticeably masculine or feminine in appearance. What I could tell, though, was that this person was armed and carrying a dagger. I had to call the police now. I may have a gun, but I'm way too afraid to confront this creepy-looking person on my own, especially since I was probably not going to have the guts to actually shoot him or her if they attacked me or tried to get inside. Suddenly, we made eye contact. I felt my heart drop. I saw a smirk form across the person's face as they walked toward the front door, toward me. I jumped up and ran away toward the kitchen and called 911. After being redirected to the state police barracks, I told the dispatcher that an armed man or woman with some sort of dagger was creeping around my house. I stayed on the phone with them as I heard the person tapping on the front door, presumably with their weapon. I couldn't tell you what I felt at this point. Unfortunately, the closest officer was about half an hour away from me, so I had to fend for myself until then. I tried my best to describe the person to the dispatcher, but I simply couldn't. I told her about the motion light coming on the first night, the tapping noises, and the sound of someone walking on my patio. She then asked if he or she tried to force entry, but I said no, which was equally as baffling to the two of us. I jumped when I suddenly heard the tapping coming from behind me. I heard a deep, muffled laugh coming from outside. At least now I knew it was a man. I looked at my phone after not hearing the dispatcher for a few moments, only to notice that the call had dropped. Why now? Dang reception out here in the middle of nowhere. I felt genuinely afraid for my life at this point, so I ran up to the upper part of my foyer and lied down on the carpet and focused my attention on both halves of my house, the front door and the back door, gun in my hand, phone in the other. I didn't have to recall the barracks, given the dispatcher had already called me back by the time I settled down on the ground in the foyer. My phone signal was weak, so I wasn't sure how much longer I would be able to stay on the line. As I waited, I heard the occasional tapping noise on my windows and doors. I then heard for the first time the sound of my back door being tapped. I talked to the dispatcher, who was doing her best job to keep me calm as I sat there like a scared little mouse hiding from a cat. I felt so scared, even with a gun in my hand. After about 15 minutes and losing connection with the dispatcher again, the occasional sounds ceased. I went into the master bedroom and looked out the window toward the road. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity when I finally saw a car driving up toward my house. Finally! I ran downstairs and waited near the front door and watched as a squad car came into my driveway. As I watched, 2 cops came out, one coming up to the door as the other walked around the house. I opened the door and greeted the female officer who came inside. We stood there in my foyer as I explained the previous night's events leading up to tonight, and then finally tonight. I also gave my description of the person. She made notes about everything, while the male officer was walking around my house. After a few more questions, she told me that they'll drive around the area a couple of times and recommend that my parents install a security system when they return from their trip. I still felt nervous after they left, especially because the male officer was unable to find a trace of the person who was screwing with me. Hopefully this potential burglar, or whatever they were, is now aware that this isn't a house to be messed with. When my parents returned the next day, I filled them in on what had occurred during their trip. It wasn't until about a month later when my parents finally had a wireless security system installed in our home. Luckily, nothing major happened during that month, even during the times when I was home alone. However, the story doesn't end here. Unfortunately, there was another smaller incident that occurred, this time when I wasn't home, but both of my parents were. I was away from home for a couple of days on a fishing and camping trip with 2 friends from school, when my mom had called me, telling me that they suspected that somebody had been trespassing on our property late the previous evening. My dad had gone outside to investigate after noticing our garage light come on several times over the span of about an hour as he sat in the living room watching television. Of course, he found nobody, but he did notice that one of our patio chairs had been moved ever so slightly. I came home and never truly felt comfortable at night, even in my locked, secured house. Sometimes at night, my mind plays tricks on me, and I imagine hearing the same tapping noises I heard previously. Of course, I don't believe anyone's there, but I can't shake the feeling. Even a year later, I still sometimes feel like someone is outside my house when I'm awake at night. So, yeah, possible burglar, murderer, whoever you are, wherever you are. I hope we don't ever cross paths again.
So this is being posted because, as the title says, my creeper father has made a comeback. At least he attempted to. Due to this attempt, I was reminded of some of his creepy moments and decided to share some of them. Quick notes. Parents divorced when I was 7. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and I'm currently 28 years old. None of us have spoken to him in 6 or 7 years. He recently attempted contact, but none of us were willing to deal with him. I did a post a year or 2 back about how his family tended to watch my siblings and I sleep when we visited. They did that for years, and to this day we still don't understand why. I also made a post about his mother attempting to kidnap me from school after the divorce. I intended to post more creepy family antics, but I became busy with life. Now that we're all caught up, let's get to the meat of all of this. So my father is, at the worst of times, a mentally unstable abuser, and at the best, a deadbeat dad. After the divorce, we saw him less and less. Because of this, and court papers, his abuse became less physical and more creepy. He would do things like walk in on my siblings and I in the shower or changing by picking the lock. Upon entering, he would say he had to ask us something. Usually it was something like what we wanted for dinner, or if we wanted to go see our grandparents. Things that could have easily been asked through a door, or even waited until we were done. I have 2 younger sisters and 1 younger brother. We all grew up very close, and at our youngest ages tended to change or shower together, so no one was left alone with Dad. As we grew up, we learned how to keep him out of the room and bathroom. So we began to do other things. Rubbing my younger brother's inner thigh when he was 4, and talking about how much he looked like our mother. Slapping my younger sisters on the butt as she went up to accept an award at school when she was 8 or 9. This stuff became pretty normal, despite our visits being sporadic. When he would try to focus on making life hard for my mom, he would file with the courts, saying she was keeping us from seeing him, when in actuality he was just never picking us up. When I was 15, I got a call from my father's stepdad, informing us that our father was missing. This was news to us at the time, because we hadn't heard from him for over 3 years. However, my grandpa claimed that Dad had talked about seeing us all the time. 2 weeks go by since Grandpa had last called, and still no sign of Dad. One day, Mom picks up all of us early from school with the news that he had been found. We weren't sure how to feel, of course, but that soon changed when Mom began to drive to an aunt's house 4 hours away. We realized something was going on, and asked what it was. Mom said it wasn't the cops who found Dad. It was Grandpa. He had been found half a mile away from where we were living, his car loaded with hunting equipment, though he didn't hunt, and a picture of me and another of my mother. Both of our faces were scratched out, and he had been muttering about how to kill us. Now apparently Grandpa moved Dad in his car, took his hunting equipment, and then phoned Mom about it. Then Grandpa phoned the cops anonymously to go pick up the crazy man outside a Kmart. The cops found Dad outside the Kmart under severe mental duress, shouting about someone having taken his hunting bow set and shotgun. Dad didn't have any of that registered, so they didn't know if he had it or if it was just in his head. And they take him in, and they have no clue about Grandpa's involvement. Months later, he's released with a bunch of pills to keep him in check, but he never takes them. He's granted continued visitation with us, spends the next few years seeing us even more sporadically, but still filing reports that my mother never lets him see us. He shows up at my brother's middle school when he's 14, attempts to pull him out of class to take him to go see a prostitute. When my brother refuses to go, Daddy Dearest decides to cause a scene and tries to fist fight my little brother. Campus police get involved, and when Dad is questioned, he informs them that my brother doesn't respect him because of me. Father is escorted off campus and banned. We hear nothing from him again for another couple of years. Then he shows up, demands visitation with my siblings, which the court for some reason still lets him have, and because I'm over 18, I didn't have to see him. I was already at a friend's house, so my mom told him she'd call me. He said not to bother. He took the other 3 to see our grandparents, and in the midst of berating my 3 siblings and talking smack about my mother and I, my littlest sister stands up to him. Support is given by the other 2 with her, and Dad returns them to my mother saying I've poisoned them against him. I reach 22. We're called and told his mother is dying. All of us attend. We say goodbye and pay our respects at the funeral, returning to our schooling, lives, and jobs. I get married and don't even get a card from him. Both sisters graduate college. He never shows up to the ceremonies. Little brother graduates high school and not even a phone call. Last week, he sends 3 out of the 4 of us a Facebook message. None of us have him blocked, but we don't have him added either. My brother received a message saying how, "You know Daddy loves you, and his life has been really hard. I've tried to always be there for you and do what's best. Your mother always stopped me. She and your older sister hate me. Please talk to me so I can tell you how my life has been." A sister received something similar in phrasing. Neither message asked about them at all. In my message, he says he stayed away because of me and my request. That even though I've deprived him of interaction with my siblings, he still loves me and wants to tell me about his life. He goes on to try and remind me that the family was broken up because of me. He briefly mentions my marriage in an, "Oh yeah, you got married, my life is terrible, you need to message me so I can tell you about it" kind of way. When we informed our mother, she told me she got a call from the state where my dad lived, but didn't answer because she wasn't home. She hadn't called him back in honesty because she didn't know the number was his, and didn't think about it being from him until we told her. She listened to the message he left. Turned out he just breathed into the phone for a bit before saying her name, my name, and my siblings' names. Then more breathing till the machine cut him short. All of us agreed that we didn't want to deal with this creep anymore. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. First off, I just wanted to give a special thank you to my guest collaborator this episode, ArtistCaleb. He's a friend of mine, and he does some gaming stuff on his channel, but he has a very good voice, and he does lots of live streams. He does lots of commercials and sometimes reads books and stuff like that, so if you like that kind of thing, be sure to go check him out because he deserves a lot more love than he currently has right now. So if you guys could help and give him some support, that would be great. The link to his channel is in the description below, and I will also leave a comment that I will pin in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback, constructive criticism, or anything you'd like to say, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, as I read every single one of them. Second order of business, very soon I'm going to be opening a Patreon account. It's not mandatory, of course, but I'd like to hear what you guys think of that. Perhaps you could leave a comment telling me your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll give them all a look and see if maybe we can figure out some cool reward tiers or something like that. I just want to hear your guys' opinion on that. As always, if you have a story you'd like me to read, or a story that you'd like to send in, links to all of my social media are located in the description below. That is my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Feel free to send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to read or reply to your message as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, the name of the story, and how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video it appears in. If anybody is curious about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below in the order which it appears. I also leave links to the wonderful artists just in case you want to check out more of their work, because the main guys I use, Miyuji and Doblato Studios, are very talented, and they deserve a lot of love. They have a lot, but, they always deserve more. So if you guys like the music, please be sure to go check those guys' channels out and give them some love. Last but not least, if you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to let me know, and I'll try to work it into the channel and do my best to improve. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys have a wonderful day.